Well, hello everyone. Welcome to our webinar, and welcome back if you were trying to join us last week when we had a few technical issues. So thank you for bearing with us. We're back, and we didn't risk turning the cameras off this time. My name's Alistair Roth. I'm the Executive Director of AIIA Victoria. It's great to have you all with us. We have members of AIIA Vic and members of AIIA branches all around the country, and plenty of other guests. So thank you very much for your interest. Just a brief word on the running order before we start. We'll take questions in the second half. I'm sure you're all very familiar now that you can type your questions in the Q&A tab in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. You can vote on questions posed by other people, and we'll send out a recording of the talk afterwards anyway. So to today's webinar. Last week, Wednesday, August the 19th, was World Humanitarian Day, 19th of August every year, and it's to pay tribute to aid workers who risk their lives in humanitarian service and to draw attention to and rally support for people affected by crises all around the world. This is the fourth in our series of Women in International Affairs, and it's great that we're joined from Bhutan by Seeta Giri. Seeta is the Regional Advisor Asia for the Humanitarian Advisory Group and was recommended to us as a world expert in post-crisis response and recovery. Indeed, she's got an absolutely stellar CV, many years of field-based experience with the UN and international NGOs, but I'll let Seeta talk more about her career and achievements and highlights, and I'm sure she'll be happy to answer any questions if there's anyone out there who's wanting to get into a similar career. So Seeta, thank you very much for joining us again. Thank you in advance too for all the effort you've put into the presentation you've done, and I'll hand over to you and see you at the Q&A. So thanks again.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thanks to Australian Institute of International Affairs for giving me this opportunity to present, and all the audience, and especially my apologies and thank you for your patience, your interest to join, and also patience to be back again today. So thank you so much. I'm sure you've gone through my profile, but I wanted to, before I take you to my professional journey, I want to take you back a little bit to where I come from. So as Alistair mentioned, my name is Seeta Giri. I'm from Bhutan, currently working as regional advisor with the Humanitarian Advisory Group. And before that, I've worked with UN, UNDP particularly, and UN Resident Coordinator's Office in various missions. I come from a small village in Bhutan, south part of Bhutan, southeast part of Bhutan actually, where everyone knows everybody. It's like a big family. And we do not lock our doors when we go out to the farm or we go to market or to our neighbor's house. And then in 2007, I managed to start my international career with UNDP in Afghanistan. A big cultural shift for me, starting from dress code as a woman, the security protocols and security measures to follow, and where I had to get through 3 security points to go to my office. So it was a huge difference from where I came and where I went into as part of my career in the humanitarian sector. And that's how I started my journey into the humanitarian world. I would like to take you briefly through the slides, the presentation I have. Are you able to see that? Is it working? Hello?
Not yet.
Let me do
the screen share.
Screen share again. Screen share. Is it working?
Yes, that's perfect. If you just see it, if you just, yeah, perfect. That's a big screen, all good.
Okay, thank you very much. So my first, actually the ground for international or the development world was through Save the Children Bhutan, where I worked as program officer in 1995. And I would say this is also a very family-friendly working environment I found. When I joined SAVE, I had a 10-month-old baby with me, but I found quite a good environment for me to work as a mother, as a professional, and that was my first exposure to the development world in the career. After Save the Children, I moved to UNDP Bhutan. That was 1998 to 2006. I started as a program officer and then moved as head of environment and climate change portfolio with UNDP Bhutan. And my first window to the international world, I would say, through the UN in Bhutan. And my first real experience into the humanitarian sector, the humanitarian world, comes through UNDP in Afghanistan, where I was there in 2007 and 8. As mentioned, this was my first exposure also. And professionally, my time in Afghanistan as project manager for UNDP's disaster management program in Afghanistan. This was a great learning experience for me, working with the government of Afghanistan, particularly the Afghanistan National Disaster Management Authority, UN agencies, NGOs, and some with some restricted field visits. It was a real training ground for me. Each day was a learning experience. And now when I reflect back, of course, the courage I had to be able to join and move into Afghanistan, coming from a tiny village in Bhutan. But I feel if I hadn't done Afghanistan, perhaps I wouldn't understand UN and what it does if I didn't have that experience. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity being able to join the UN in Afghanistan. But this was also on a personal ground as well as professionally. This was also a time where I learned how to be very patient. Things move very slow there, and to listen, and most importantly, to observe and observe, as everything was new to me and I could not afford to make any mistakes, work-wise or personal interactions or etiquette, because it was completely a different world, and especially being a woman there. As you'll see from the photos, you work with a variety of people, particularly the government counterparts, the disaster management committees in the provinces, who are all men most of the time, having to maneuver through that and have the conversation, being able to influence what you would like to say. It was quite a challenging moment. But also the travel, sometimes you're stuck in the middle of the snow during your field visits, but you also have these wonderful trips to some of the beautiful and most remote province like Daikundi, the central part of Afghanistan. And you also have some nice moments with your government counterpart, with colleagues. This is a photo of Disaster Management Authority field office in one of the provinces. And Afghanistan has the most wonderful nuts and fruits, as you will see, the melons. Also, I had an opportunity to interact, of course, very limited, but with the communities wherever I could, I would interact. And these are wonderful kids that I met in Bamiyan, central part of the hilly region of Afghanistan. You also come across beautiful, so while you have challenges on one side, there is also the beautiful moments, visits to Bandi Amir Lake, the beautiful lake in Bamiyan, the Mazar-e-Sharif Mosque. So you have a mix of, challenges, difficulties, but also the fun moments. So it comes all as a package. You can't have just the good part or the bad part. Next assignment was in Cambodia. It's a family duty station and it's a beautiful country, and I really enjoyed working in Cambodia. I was there for 3 years along with my family, my husband and 2 children, son and daughter. And it was a wonderful experience I had. Although my work was more about UNDP's planning, monitoring and reporting and support to the program teams, I also came across some situations, for example, the Typhoon Ketsana in 2009, and there was also the Cambodia-Thai border dispute related to the 11th century Previa temple, the temple picture that you see here. So I was part of the UN joint mission for assessment in Previa in April of 2011, where the international community together with the government was preparing grounds for people if they are displaced, if the situation, the crisis escalate, and where they would be placed. So we were part of the joint assessment there. Next, also while I was in Cambodia, I had the opportunity to participate in the search training with the Jordanian army in Jordan, in Amman in 2011. This was a real kind of a experience for me, like training on how do you manage if you are taken hostage or when you're traveling and there are bomb blasts, how do you encounter, how do you interact, how do you respond? So it was a kind of a mixture of both physical as well as mental training, I would say, very important and useful as I moved on with my career within the humanitarian sector. And after Cambodia was Bangladesh, and this is also the country very close, of course, to my country, Bhutan, but also where I served the longest 4.5 years. I was in Bangladesh. And as you see from the photo, it's a country with 165 million people, one of the highest density population as well. And also hazard prone, all kinds of disasters that have occurred in Bangladesh, also impacted by climate change. And while I was there, I noted that it was in Bangladesh, it was like a season full of hazard calendar, like January, February, you have the cold wave, especially in the north part of Bangladesh. And about 50 to 100 people die every year from cold wave. And it's not because of the very low temperature. Perhaps it's more about poverty, not having enough food to eat, keep yourself warm, enough energy, and warm clothes to protect yourself. So it's more about vulnerability, poverty that people died. And it continues, although it has improved over the past years, but cold wave in the north starts in January, February. Then you have March, April, May, which is cyclone season. And you've seen, I'm sure in the media, the numerous cyclone that Bangladesh is hit. There was one recent one that hit West Bengal part of India and also the southwest part of Bangladesh, Cyclone Amphan in May. So you have cyclone March, April, May. And then you have June, July, August, sometimes until September, you have the monsoon. And right now, monsoon season is ongoing. And you may have seen in the media, there's flooding in the north part of Bangladesh, quite severely affected, government and international community responding to the crisis. And then again, you have the second cyclone season, September, October, November. So as you see, the whole year is full of calendar of natural hazards and disasters that happen. My role in Bangladesh has been more to work with the government of Bangladesh, particularly the Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief, the UN system, NGOs, for more in terms of disaster risk reduction, preparedness, response, and post-disaster recovery. While this is a photo, again, as I mentioned, while Bangladesh is very vulnerable to hazards and different kinds of disasters, but people are also very, very resilient. They've been exposed and they are resilient. They manage through, like this is a picture of Satkira, somewhere in Satkira, one of the field visits. I mean, you have floods everywhere, but people, the shops are open, the market functioning, people are just drinking tea, enjoying. I mean, it's almost becoming like normal life. Of course, there are difficulties, but people are highly resilient and they know how to adapt and they continue to adapt. You have the kids going to school. This is a picture of waterlogging that also started sometime in 2010-11, but it was quite severe in 2011, one of the field visits. So southwest part of Bangladesh, again, Satkira, Khulna area, where people, the areas are quite waterlogged and people move from their house and shift to somewhere around the road area. embankment area, which is slightly raised land so that they can keep themselves dry and safe. So this continues, and Bangladesh comes across several disaster events. There was one, this is an interesting one, and I wanted to share with you. This was April 2013, the collapse of an 8-story building called Rana Plaza building that hosted factories and also shopping mall Rana Plaza. And the building collapsed in April of 2013, killing over like close to almost 400 people. 340 people were dead and about 4,000 people were injured. Quite a big actually crisis, and a very different kind of crisis that we saw there during that time. And Rohingya refugee camp in Cox's Bazar, I'm sure you're all familiar with that. Bangladesh, Cox's Bazar is hosting one of the world's largest refugee population. And again, this camp area is again, because of the dense population, quite vulnerable to cyclone that hits Cox's Bazar region, monsoon right now. There's monsoon going on, so there's flooding happening. Fortunately, as of now, we haven't had any cases of severe flooding or landslides, but this has happened in the past years. After Afghanistan, I did also, while I was in Bangladesh, I also had the opportunity to go on missions to Serbia. That was in 2014. Sava River flooded and resulted in huge flooding across Serbia, Croatia, and Bosnia. This was supposed to be one of the worst floods in the past 100 years, they say. So I was part of the UN, World Bank, EU, and of course the government of Croatia, Bosnia, and Serbia. We did post-disaster needs assessment following the floods. Sierra Leone. This was quite an interesting assignment for me, and I was there in 2015. Ebola, as you know, was first identified in West Africa sometime in March of 2014. And I was there actually to support the government of Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea with the Ebola recovery assessment. 2.5 years after the Ebola was first identified, it affected, in fact, there were about 28,000 cases, positive cases, and 11,300 deaths, all in Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. And it took a long time, almost 2.5 years, for the Ebola to be out of the region. And I worked quite closely with the development partners, of course, the government of Sierra Leone, NGO community, and supported basically the government development partner coordination platform, and we supported with the Ebola recovery assessment, as well as the recovery planning and strategy. Yes, Myanmar. Immediately after Sierra Leone, then I was also mobilized to support Myanmar, the UNDP Myanmar. You see the picture here. This is Pagan, ancient city of temples in central part of Myanmar, which hosts about 2,200 pagodas, temples, and monasteries built around 11th and 13th century. This was hit by a 6.8 magnitude earthquake in August of 2016. And I was there exactly 1 year before, actually after the slides and flash floods and slides. The cyclone Komen triggered severe widespread floods in July and August of 2015, 1 year before the earthquake that hit Pagan city, that affected 2 million people. 12 out of 14 states were affected by the flood and landslides. And here my role was as a recovery advisor to UNDP, working with the government in carrying out the recovery needs assessment in Myanmar after the floods and landslides. Nepal. I would say Nepal, and I'm sure many of you who have visited Nepal, it's a country of temples and Himalayas, the mountains. They're so close. One of the beautiful duty station I had opportunity to work for 2.5 years. Of course, it was after the earthquake in 2015. Nepal was hit by earthquake in 2015 by a 7.6 magnitude earthquake in April 25th. And 2 weeks after, on 12th of May, there was another earthquake of 7.3 magnitude. So that devastated the country, especially the rural region. And I think one of the challenges Nepal felt compared to many other countries affected by earthquake was the number of aftershocks. Until almost 1 year after, June of 2016, there were about 300 aftershocks. Like I was there beginning of 2016 and still it was going on. So that actually made it quite challenging for the recovery and reconstruction work, the aftershocks. Majority of the damage was felt by the housing sector. About 800,000 houses, particularly in the rural areas, were damaged. This was a huge, but this is also a crisis that brought together international community. There was a huge support for post-crisis, post-earthquake recovery and reconstruction of Nepal. And also while I was in Nepal around summer of 2017, I was part of the post-flood recovery needs assessment. This was with the National Planning Commission, south part of Nepal that's hit by monsoon and floods almost every year or every subsequent year. So that was 2017 was quite heavy flooding that happened. So Government Planning Commission led the recovery assessment. So the UN and the World Bank supported that process. So I was part of that process from the international community supporting the government. My role with, in Nepal was also as recovery advisor, supporting the National Reconstruction Authority. And the photo that you see is the launch of the post-disaster needs recovery, post-disaster recovery plan. This was a roadmap, 5-year roadmap for post-earthquake recovery and reconstruction, led by the National Reconstruction Authority, the government of Nepal, supported by the international community. And after Nepal, then I had an assignment with the UN resident coordinator in Pakistan. This was basically Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province in Pakistan has been undergoing conflict for a long time, over a decade, and people had displaced, almost like 1 million people had displaced from the locality. And in 2017 and 18, with the peace process, about 95% of the people who were displaced moved back to their villages. UN, with funding from DFID, a joint UN program was conceptualized, and I was there to lead the inception phase. It was a joint program of UNICEF, UNDP, FAO, UN Women, supporting the post-conflict recovery program after the return of the tribal people in KB province. Finally, my journey into humanitarian advisory group. It was actually, it's a miracle how I joined the HAG. I'm a Haggy, and it was actually our winter in Asia, 2017, that I visited Sydney. It was my holiday, one of my holidays to Australia, Sydney, Melbourne, and also I combined my travel with the Australasian Aid Conference in Canberra. And this is where I met Beth, Kate, and the HAG team, and my first interaction during the Australasian Aid Conference 2018, beginning of 2018. And that's how my journey started with the HAG. And following this, I was part of several studies, evaluations, design missions, and I was part of the diversity and inclusion study that we did, which I was able to also present at the Australasian Aid Conference in 2019. Also joined the design mission of DFAT Australia in Bangladesh, the camps and host communities, which was part of the DFAT's 3-year design program supporting the Rohingya community. So that's it in terms of my career. But I just wanted to also let you know, perhaps my photo slides makes you think that career in humanitarian sector is all rosy and interesting, right? Wrong. It's quite challenging, but you also, as I said in the beginning, you have a mix of both. You have the difficult times and also the fun times, and it's up to us how we make it interesting, a learning experience, but also moments that you cherish, but moments where you had failures, you were very depressed. It's a combination of both, I would say. Afghanistan was one of my most challenging duty station. When you're away from family, working in a non-family duty station, you rely on your friends, close colleagues and friends. That's the network you have to support you. And my stress buster was the Bhutanese lunch. Every Friday we would get together, and Bhutanese men are great cooks, so we really enjoyed. And we shared our problems, we laughed at some of the things that happened, and we shared, we also tried to help each other, both professionally and also personally. So that was a good kind of a safety net for me that I could rely on. I also had done Art of Living course before actually I took my international career. I think it was a good timing. And daily meditation and help me stay calm and also strong and confident. I would say, not just in Afghanistan, also during my other assignments as well, particularly Sierra Leone. That was also quite a difficult assignment, also working like 24/7. It was quite an intense assignment. And in Afghanistan, I would sometimes wake up listening to the sounds of bomb blast, and the UN security would announce white city, which means no movement outside where you're located, where you're home, or whether you're in the office, you're supposed to be there until there is another announcement. There were crazy times. There was also the Serena Hotel attack while I was in Afghanistan. There was also attack on the Indian embassy. Quite tough times. But as you would have seen, I started my career with Save the Children US and back in Bhutan, and with UNDP and UN Resident Coordinator's Office in several duty stations. But it is the surge mechanism of UNDP that actually gave me the space and the opportunity and the experience that I have now to participate in different crisis missions. And I'm deeply grateful for this opportunity that I had through the UNDP surge mechanism. How are we doing with the time?
That's perfect, Seeta.
Okay.
We're more than happy to move and take some questions if you're ready with that.
Yeah. Okay, so then my thank you note, again, back to my beautiful country where I began, this time, of course, in the capital city. Yes, thank you so much for your patience, and welcome any questions you have.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Seeta. I might just, if you're able just to stop your screen share, and then hopefully we'll come back into view the two of us. That's fantastic. Well, some really some wonderful pictures, even though some of them are in very challenging circumstances. But I think we'll share that perhaps as well when we send out the recording. But excellent. Lots of questions coming, but we'll just maybe kick off first, Seeta, with how did you get your first job in the humanitarian sector, and were there any particular challenges you faced doing that?
Mm-hmm. My first job in the humanitarian sector, as I showed, was Afghanistan, because after beautiful Bhutan, and then suddenly I'm thrown deep into Afghanistan's situation, but also I was the program manager for UNDP's disaster management program. So in a country like Afghanistan in 2007-8, again, I would say how I got into the first job, I managed to get Afghanistan UNDP because I'd already had experience with UNDP. Although it was more about climate change and slowly into disaster risk reduction, but this was boom, like into really managing the disaster risk management in a crisis country. So it was through UNDP Bhutan platform, I would say, because I was already in the system. But how I managed through, as I said, it was a learning for me. This was the time when I really learned how to be patient. And I'm sure some of my colleagues, and especially Beth, I don't know if she's around listening. I mean, I had one of the most difficult government counterpart. The head of the Afghanistan Disaster Management Authority was an ex-warlord. So you can imagine he had no development experience. He was there because of the political backing. And each day was a learning experience. As I mentioned, I didn't go into detail, but I said I was always listening, observing, making sure that I don't make any mistakes. Yeah, whether it's professional or even etiquette or anything. So it was quite tough, but I would say this was also a very good learning platform for me. I learned quite a lot. And as I said, if I hadn't done Afghanistan, I would feel I haven't done UN.
That's a very good answer. I was noting that during your presentation, you'd mentioned the challenges of working in what are often very male-oriented environments. But have you found that it's been an advantage to you being a woman in some of these environments? Have you been able to get things done or get access to people that you could as a woman, but a man necessarily couldn't?
Yes, there is some truth to that. But again, I would say perhaps the difficulties and challenges outweigh the positive side, I would say. Humanitarian sector especially is still a very male dominated, I'm sorry to say, but that's how it is. It's because boots on the ground, it's primarily men. So it's, I think there are also challenges for women, especially if you have family, to be away for a long time. So there are a lot of other challenges when you're for being in difficult crisis situations. So normally there are fewer women in the humanitarian sector, which makes it difficult because you are maneuvering, you are trying to be visible and vocal in the midst of all these male meeting groups or committees. And also the government counterpart happened to be the same. So it's quite challenging. But indeed, as you said, also sometimes, I don't know, it's interesting. I found Afghanistan, the job I was doing, perhaps I could do a lot of the things which I could push. Perhaps a male person in my position may not be able to do. I feel that at times, because people, they're quite respectful of women, despite whatever situation. The Afghan men are very respectful, and also in other countries, the government counterpart, they're very respectful. So sometimes through that female angle, we're able to push things and challenge things far more than perhaps maybe a male, they would be a bit thinking twice. So yes, I did come across that.
Yeah. You've worked in many different countries there. Do you have translators accompany you when you go, or do you speak enough languages you can get by, or what sort of local support do you have when you go to one of these new places particularly?
Okay. That's an interesting question. And also the whole issue of diversity, inclusion, the language issue comes there. Fortunately, for example, Bangladesh, where I served most, I understand, but maybe because it's close to Bhutan, and I've been there for a long time, so I learned the language, so I could understand, and that was easy. But Sierra Leone, Cambodia, that was tough. Myanmar was another one where people, the government people absolutely, they don't even speak English, even if they know sometimes. So because I am part of a system, I'm with the UN organization, we have national colleagues with UN, so I always had national team support to support me. So I would never go to the field or meetings alone. It's always with the national counterparts, national staff. So that way, language, although it's a barrier, it would make a huge difference if you can speak the language that they speak and understand. That's there, but because of the support that I had, national colleagues always being with me, because even if I was on short missions, there's always a team to work together with me. And that's how we should be working as international humanitarian workers. If you are from, even if you're from the region or from any other country, we have to make sure we are working very closely, and our role is to support the local actors and the local staff rather than overtake that. So the support system and making sure it's not just you're using the support, but making sure that you're leaving behind some of the learning and knowledge and capacity. That's very important. Thank you.
Sorry, I was on mute. One of the popular questions here is what are the key skills that you've needed and used, Seeta, in your assignments? And did you acquire these skills during the way, or have you done formal training?
Again, another interesting question. I would say I think it's a mix of both. I did have formal trainings, as I said, search. I mean, there were several trainings that we had to go through online and training workshops. But as I said, the photo that the reason why I showed the photo is this was a real kind of a practical training session with the Jordanian army in Amman. Was quite useful in terms of how you really react both physically and mentally with your brain. How do you react in such a crisis situation? That is there. But I would say at the end of the day, it's us as individual, the confidence that we carry, our determination to do something, taking the risk. That's why we are in the humanitarian sector. If we are so worried of ourselves, how are we there to help others? So perhaps also, I don't know, like coming from a small village community, I mean, perhaps it's the way we grew, helping each other. So that kind of a attitude and confidence, sometimes jumping into something, you don't know where you are, but you are there and you have to learn. I mean, either you swim or you kind of sink. So it's like that situation. But at the end of the day, training, of course, does help. But I think it's more than that. It's our, how do you say, being able to use your judgment when things happen, being able to, or being also compassionate, being able to understand, connect with the people that you're working. Because I found again, Afghanistan, while it's a country of crisis, but also the government counterparts, despite all the cultural issues, people are extremely warm and happy, and they're very helpful. And I found some of the guidance they gave me in terms of how to be safe, perhaps even better than I could get from the UN security staff, because they knew exactly when to avoid which track, those kind of things the government counterpart would guide. So you need to have that connection. You need to build that emotional kind of a trust and support. I think all of that comes together. But at the end of the day, I think it's no training can compensate actual real life scenario.
That's very true. And yeah, field-based experience is what it's about. Another question is, what advice would you have for women who want to work in security and development or humanitarian? Mm-hmm. How do you get started in this career path?
Okay. Yes. As I said, of course, it's quite challenging for women to start and to be working in the humanitarian sector, but it's not impossible. And there are women, very strong women, who are out there. I mean, I come from a very different context, and look where I am here. So if I can do, anyone can do, any woman can do, I would say. So of course, I would say the determination, dedication to be out there, to take a little bit of risk and to be there. So in order to get, of course, a job, sometimes volunteering helps. Volunteering in the humanitarian sector gives you the entry, but it doesn't always have to be like that. You can already also sometimes get a good position. You need to be aware of what's there, and don't be hesitant because it's all male-dominated society or male-dominated space. Until unless we are there, it will continue to be so. So we have to be kind of strong, and we need to bring the change that we want to see. So I would highly encourage, it's not an impossible area. Look for opportunities. There's a lot happening. Unfortunately, like disaster management crisis is an area where there are a lot of opportunities for work around the world. I mean, there is crisis. I mean, it shouldn't be like this, but that's happening. And there's a lot of space to work, to experience, to grow in that area. So I would definitely encourage all young women to try, explore. And I'm sure if you like it, then you can kind of continue and then grow up. There are opportunities.
Yeah, that's a good challenge to put out there, Seeta. Perhaps could you just talk a little bit more about what you're doing with Humanitarian Advisory Group?
Okay, yeah. Perhaps maybe before I go into that, I would like to also say that it has been so refreshing for me to join HAG after doing like almost 20 years with the UN, and it's completely different system. But also that's where whatever I have now, it's the UN that gave me that experience and platform, particularly the UNDP Surge. And then coming to HAG, it's like so refreshing, so different, and it's kind of a small, tightly knit, but also like a happy and very hardworking group of women. Again, it's all women. It's so different from what I did before. So in HAG, I'm basically part of the research team. HAG does evaluations of crisis response by different countries. Particularly, HAG has been also involved in evaluating, reviewing some of the DFAT Australia response to Syria, Myanmar, other countries. We also do help DFAT Australia with the design missions. For example, this Bangladesh, the Rohingya response 3-year strategy, HAG was part of that, and that's how I managed to join. We do review. Right now, we're doing part of the Humanitarian Horizon program, which is also supported by DFAT. We're doing diversity and inclusion study. The first phase study was over last year. I would encourage you to go to the HAG website and learn about our work. Now we are into second phase of the study. So basically, I'm involved in the studies, reviews of crisis program, looking at how we can improve the humanitarian response, good practice, looking at lessons learned, sometimes also helping with the design and evaluations. So that's what we do. I would highly encourage you to go to the HAG website. There's plenty of publications, interesting stuff for you. And it's an interesting team. So we have one regional associate in Pacific, and me, I'm covering the Asia region. So I'm happy to be back home, sitting at home, helping HAG, working as their advocate for the Asia region.
We'll definitely put a link to the website when we send out the recording. But just going back to your earlier career, you've traveled extensively. A lot of what this type of work involved, it's very much hands-on and field-based. How is COVID affecting that? Is it likely that there's going to have to be more local ownership of some of these issues if there are limitations on travel?
That's a very interesting question. And in fact, while still with HAG early this year, from February until in fact just recently, I'm engaged with UNDP in Cox's Bazar. I was in Cox's Bazar just when the COVID started, like in Bangladesh. I was there in March, and then by later part of March, then I moved back to Bhutan because situation was getting quite bad. And I was there actually to support the cyclone preparedness and monsoon preparedness. I ended up working on the COVID response. So yes, COVID has been, and if you remember my slide, the population in Bangladesh, especially highly dense populated countries, has a big challenge because of course you're supposed to do social distancing. Where is the space in a small Rohingya camp, like almost 600,000-700,000 people in one small camp? So you have situation where it's quite challenging. Access to water and sanitation, you're supposed to be the health, the hygiene part, washing hands. I mean, making sure that people have access to all this hand washing stations. These are challenging, especially in places where you don't have that. But also, on the other hand, I think COVID has positive aspects. The silver lining, I would say, I mean, look at all the flights that's been grounded. Not necessarily it's good, but then the transportation, the travel, Now, when you look back, was it necessary for hundreds and thousands of people to travel all the way to New York, or from New York to Bangkok or somewhere for a conference, I mean, for a workshop? It's happening now, like online. So I think it's also showing the way that things can happen. Climate change, yes, opportunities for climate change, minimizing some of the greenhouse gas emissions, looking at green growth during the COVID situation, but also localization that you touched upon. I see it is showing the path. Of course, it was already happening in some of the countries like Indonesia, Pacific Islands. There were already this drive of, yes, we want to do it ourselves. We will do it with some international support. But with the COVID, it's also showing the path again for localization and supporting that agenda, because who are the frontliners, who are there in the forefront? It's the local people, the volunteers who are working day and night. I mean, I see in Bangladesh, in Cox's Bazar, is the community volunteers who are in the front line, who are supporting all the COVID response work, sanitizing the cities, supporting the people when people are evacuated to cyclone shelters. It's the volunteers who are helping. So definitely localization. I think COVID will have a positive influence on the localization agenda. And we see that it's possible. A lot of online support, like right now I'm doing on remote support for Bangladesh for the Rohingya response, UNDP Cox's Bazar, but also COVID response in Cox's Bazar. So it's possible to do a lot of the work online. So hopefully, I think slowly this shows the path for stronger local leadership and the regional and international experts more as experts behind providing the technical support in the area that's needed.
That's good. There may obviously be less opportunity for international travel for a time, but there's a question. How did you manage work and deployments with a family?
Okay. Again, as I think I mentioned earlier, it's also individual determination, individual drive and confidence. South Asia generally is not a ideal situation when it comes to gender parity. We see a lot of differences, particularly South Asia. But fortunately for Bhutan, I would say we are much better off compared to many other South Asian countries. But again, at the end of the day, I would say it's us individuals to make that difference. If we want it to happen, we have to show the path. We have to overcome the challenges. It's not easy. But if you keep persisting, people will give up at time, yeah? So luckily I had a very supportive family. My husband is a doctor and he's been supportive of the work I do. And I'm where I am also because of the support he gave and the family provided, giving me the space to travel, being away from family. I had 2 young kids, as I said, when I joined UN. It was not easy, like especially being in Afghanistan, like my kids back home in the school, it was tough, but we managed it. There was rest and recuperation. They call every 6 weeks we get to come home. So that helped. Otherwise, perhaps I wouldn't have taken that assignment. So as I said, like work and family, it's individual. We have to do it. We have to make it happen. Of course, you need family support. I don't know, as I said, I mean, every individual is different. In my case, I was lucky to have a supportive family, and I'm sure most of you do. So I don't think there should be a big challenge, but it's not also very easy. You have to keep pushing and how do you say? You have to keep pushing and make sure that people listen and they know that you're not going to give up. Because I remember when I was in Afghanistan, there were many extended family members who were telling my husband, why would you let your wife go to Afghanistan? Yeah. And I mean, you have this kind of issues, so you have to manage it.
That's a very good answer. We have a question that's possibly slightly more geopolitical, but would you have any recommendations for ASEAN nations or Australia in improving their disaster response and preparedness? Is there anything Australia could be doing more in the Pacific to help disaster preparedness?
I would say, of course, there has been a lot of international support. The ASEAN, Australia has been quite active in the humanitarian sector. But I see perhaps maybe more after a crisis hits. So maybe putting more effort into preparedness, reducing risks. And there I would say making sure these countries, these mechanisms, not just looking at crisis as a crisis, but also making sure the development agenda and humanitarian agenda is coming together as one. Again, referring to the World Humanitarian Summit joint outcomes. How do we make sure we are ending we are responding to the humanitarian need, but also ending the need, making sure we are supporting long-term durable solutions, because now more and more you see protracted crisis all over, and how many countries can international community keep supporting? So perhaps I would say more in terms of focus on preparedness capacity of the countries, reducing risks, and bringing together the humanitarian and the development agenda and the funding together, not seeing as isolated pieces of work, but making sure that the work we do on poverty reduction, the work we do on governance, the work we're doing on climate change, all of these actually also are seen together, why the crisis is happening and why we look at long-term solutions. And maybe on the experience, I would say improvement. Again, the after action reviews, the learning, the evaluations that happens, the organizations themselves do it. Please come to us. We would be happy to support with that. So evaluating and learning from how we deliver humanitarian response and learning from those experiences, I would say, are important part of that continuous improving.
And really, because is there any area of humanitarian work that you would like to work on but haven't had the opportunity to do?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, most of my work has been on actually post disaster, like a natural disaster, whether it's flood or cyclone, as you see. The two pandemic that I was exposed to is the Ebola and the COVID response now. The area where a little bit, of course, in Afghanistan, the post-conflict, and in Pakistan, post-conflict scenario, that's where I would like to be. And also Middle East, somewhere in the Middle East, I would like to have that experience. I mean, not that it should happen, but given an opportunity, that's an area I would like to, especially post-conflict peace process. That's where I would like to have more experience. Thank you for asking that question. Makes me think.
Yes, well, I suppose the question, where do you think you might be going next? But there was another question, Seeta, but are there any particular NGOs who you have worked with or have respect for, seeing them in action? I mean, apart from the UN-related agencies where you've worked.
That's a tricky question because I have, during my career with the UN, I've worked with a variety of NGOs, and don't want to pinpoint one is better than the other.
Possibly not a fair question.
But definitely NGOs like ACTIONAID, I see in Bangladesh, many, even like Muslim Aid, these are Christian Aid, Islamic Relief, Plan International, Concern. These are some of the NGOs who have made a mark and they're out with the communities. But perhaps maybe I would like to take the question, maybe next step, again, these are international NGOs. They work with the local NGOs. And that's what I would like to see going forward and more in the future, in line with, again, the localization agenda. Yes, these are the NGOs who are out there, but they don't work themselves. They work in partnership with the local NGOs. And perhaps that's where we need to be focusing on building the capacity of the local NGOs so that they're able to do the work more effectively. So while we have these NGOs who are doing a lot of are active on the ground, but making sure we are not forgetting the local NGOs who partner with them and who make their work actually visible out in the field.
Yeah, that's a very, very valid point. I think it lends a bit to the next question, which was to do with internship opportunities for young people. But are you aware of many opportunities for internships for young people interested in a career in development?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, and I would say this is an extremely important area and an opportunity, especially for the young to start. And these days, more and more organizations are they offer internship programs. It's also like easy to get hardworking people, fresh blood, but also like paying much less than what they pay for the experts. So this is actually a growing area within the organization. It doesn't have to be so, like, it should not be seen as a, where you get, how do you say, bang for the buck, but also making sure that you're providing space for these group of people to grow and be experts soon, and molding them in the right area. There are quite a lot of opportunities with the NGOs, with the UN. There's a UN volunteer program, in case if you're not aware about. Of course, HAG also offers internship, and you have, I think Australia has Radar. You have a lot of search experts. I have met few of them in different countries that I was working. So you have a lot of opportunities there for European countries. There is MSB. So you have opportunities to work in organizations that does work on humanitarian sector. Again, I would say perhaps maybe Australia, if you are an Australian, you're better positioned. There's a lot of Australian humanitarian aid going to different countries. So you have better opportunities, unlike us, like me. I came from a small village. I didn't know what an internship was. So I had to try very hard to apply for a job, because that's all we knew. There were no internships those days. So in Bhutan, now we have. So I would say you are better place to apply for internships, explore. And also I would say internship is a space, it gives you space to really try out different things. Okay, you may like this, and then okay, fine, or you may not like something else. So it also gives you the space to try out and test where your interests are, where you have your passion, and then move on with the next, the real job, and moving forward in the career.
Absolutely. Well, that's very, very good advice there, Seeta, and I'm sure it's been well taken. That really brings us, we had a few more questions there, but we're not going to have time to get through all of them. So apologies to the audience if we didn't answer a specific one, but I think we've covered most of them in the broad areas, and we're coming to the end of our allotted hour, and we try and stay within the time. So I think what I will say, Seeta, from our side is thank you again very much indeed for coming on. We're glad that we've had no technical glitches this time, but fascinating talk, really interesting career. And thank you again so much for putting all the thought and effort into that presentation. That was really, really great. So from AIIA and for everyone watching, thank you all too for your time and interest. And Seeta, thanks very much again. As and when you come to Australia, we'd love to meet in person rather than over Zoom, but much appreciated. That was a fantastic presentation. So thanks again, and good luck with all you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Australian Institute of International Affairs. Thank you, Alistair. And particularly my deep appreciation to all the audience listening patiently. And also, I hope I was able to answer to some of the questions that you had, and to inspire you enough to work, to move into the humanitarian sector. As I said, if Seeta can do it, anyone can do it.
Fantastic. Well, on that note, thank you again very much, and everyone stay safe.